Okay, so let's unpack this. I want you to imagine a very specific kind of nightmare.
Oh, all right. Let's hear it.
You're in a prison cell. It's damp, dark, 17th century England. You've been locked in there for 12 years.
Why?
Yeah, 12 years. And while you're just rotting away, you have this dream, but it's not a normal dream. You write it down on these little scraps of paper, smuggle it out of the jail, and it somehow becomes like the second most widely read book in human history.
Right after the Bible.
Exactly, right after the Bible.
It really is. It's one of the most improbable success stories in literature. We're
Ah.
talking, of course, about John Bunyan's The Pilgrim's Progress.
Here you are.
And, you're right to highlight the jail cell right away. Bunyan was a nonconformist preacher, and he was locked up for holding illegal religious services. That context really matters because the whole book just screams with this sense of urgency and confinement.
It totally does. And look, I'll be honest with you. When I first picked this up for our deep dive today, I was expecting a dry, dusty sermon.
A lot of people do.
But it's actually this wild, surreal fantasy adventure. I mean, you've got giants, dragons, people getting eaten, and a main character who is basically having a total mental breakdown.
That is a fantastic way to frame it. At its core, yes, it's a religious allegory.
Mm.
But for our purpose today, I want us to really look at it as a psychological map.
A psychological map. Okay.
Right. It's a map of the human struggle with anxiety, with depression, and just the desperate search for peace.
So set the stage for us. The book opens with a guy named Christian, and he is, well, he's not having a good time.
Not at all. He's standing in the fields outside his hometown, which is literally called the City of Destruction.
Subtle.
Very. He's reading a book, the Bible, and he becomes absolutely convinced that his city is going to be burned with fire from heaven. But the defining visual here, the thing you have to picture, is what's on his back. Bunyan says he's carrying a massive, heavy burden.
And this isn't just a heavy backpack, it's like fused to him.
Yes. It represents his sin, his guilt, his existential dread. It's a physical weight he just cannot shake.
What really struck me was how his family reacts to all this. He runs home, basically hyperventilating, telling his wife and kids that they're all doomed and have to leave.
And they don't exactly validate his feelings.
No, they don't just say, hey, calm down. They treat him like he's completely insane.
They think some kind of frenzy has seized his brain. So they try to medicate him by putting him to bed. And when that doesn't work, they mock him. And finally, they just ignore him.
Which has to be so isolating.
It is incredibly isolating. And I think that's the first big psychological insight Bunyan gives us. The moment you realize you need to drastically change your life, you often feel completely alone. The people closest to you just don't see the fire that you see.
So he just snaps. There's this cinematic moment where his family is calling out to him to come back, and he literally sticks his fingers in his ears, runs out into the middle of a plain, and just screams, life! Life! Eternal life!
That's his departure. He's running toward this wicket gate that you could barely even see in the distance.
But he doesn't make it very far before hitting the first major obstacle. And this is where Bunyan starts getting really clever with the landscape. He isn't stopped by a wall or a soldier, he falls straight into a swamp.
The Slough of Despond.
Which is just an amazing name for a bog.
It really paints a picture.
Yeah. And he's with a neighbor at this point, a guy named Pliable, who decided to tag along just because he liked the idea of heaven. But they both fall into the mud.
And notice what the swamp is actually made of. Bunyan explicitly writes that it's the descent, whither the filth that attends conviction for sin doth continually run. It's a bog made entirely of fears, doubts, and discouraged apprehensions.
Okay, so translate that for us.
It's the shame spiral. You decide to change your life, right? But almost immediately you're hit with this sinking feeling of, I'm not good enough to do this. I've failed before. Who am I kidding? It's an internal bog.
And Pliable, the neighbor, handles it terribly.
Pliable is your classic fair weather friend. He struggles out of the mud, yells at Christian, is this the happiness you promised me? And just goes home.
He wants the reward without the struggle.
Exactly. But Christian can't get out easily because of that massive burden on his back. The guilt makes the depression heavier.
He does eventually get pulled out by a figure literally named Help. But barely 5 minutes later, he runs into a guy who, I have to admit, I thought made a lot of sense at first. Mr. Worldly Wise Man.
Ah, yes. from the town of Carnal Policy.
He looks at Christian, who is covered in mud and totally exhausted, and basically says, "Look, buddy, who told you to go on this dangerous journey? You're going to get yourself killed. I know a shortcut."
And do you remember what the shortcut is?
Yeah, he tells him to go to this village called Morality and see a gentleman named Mr. Legality. He says Legality's a nice guy who can get the burden off without all the drama. And honestly, why is this bad advice? It sounds like he's just saying, hey, just be a decent person and follow the rules.
That is exactly the trap Bunyan is highlighting here. To Bunyan, worldly wise man is incredibly dangerous because he's offering a sedative, not an actual cure. He's saying, just be moral, follow the societal rules, act respectable, and you'll feel better.
Fake it till you make it.
Essentially. But when Christian tries to take that path, he has to walk right past Mount Sinai, and the mountain starts glowing with fire and hanging over the road like it's going to crush him.
Oh, that's subtle.
Well, it represents the law, the Ten Commandments. Bunyan's theological point is that if you try to rely on being a good person to save you, you're eventually going to realize you can't be perfect. The law doesn't remove the burden. It just highlights how much you fail. It crushes you.
So Evangelist, who is kind of his spiritual guide, has to come back and scold him for trying to take the easy way out. Christian gets back on track, finally reaches the wicket gate, gets quickly pulled inside by a man named Goodwill.
Right, because Beelzebub is shooting arrows at anyone trying to enter the gate.
Exactly, you gotta dodge the demon arrows. Then he's taken to the House of the Interpreter, which is basically this surreal museum of object lessons to teach him how the spiritual world works.
There are a lot of vivid scenes in that house, but we have to talk about the dusty room. It's the direct follow-up to the mountain crushing him.
Yes. Christian sees this large parlor full of dust. A man starts sweeping, and the dust just flies everywhere, choking everyone in the room.
Yeah.
Then a girl comes in, sprinkles water on the floor, and suddenly the room is easily swept and cleaned.
So if we decode that, the dust is sin in the human heart, the broom is the law. When you try to clean up your life just by following rules, which is the broom, you don't actually get rid of the sin, you just stir it up. You make it visible and choking. You realize how messy you actually are.
And the water.
The water is the gospel. It's grace. It settles the dust and actually cleanses the room. Bunyan is doubling down on this idea. You cannot clean yourself up. You need outside help.
Which really ties into another room there, the man in the iron cage. That part was super dark.
It is. Christian sees a man sitting in the dark in an iron cage, just sighing as if his heart would break.
And he's a backslider, right? He basically tells Christian he's trapped in despair because he laid the reins upon his lusts. He gave up.
Right, he sinned against his conscience until he felt he could no longer repent. It's a terrifying warning for Christian about the danger of letting despair lock you in a cage of your own making.
It definitely shakes him up. But it all leads to the pivotal moment where Christian finally loses the backpack. He runs up a hill to a cross.
The central moment of the entire text. As he looks at the cross, the straps on his burden just snap. The weight falls off his back, rolls down the hill, and disappears into a sepulcher.
After all that struggling in the swamp, getting mocked, almost getting crushed by a mountain, it just falls off.
And he weeps for joy. Then 3 shining ones appear. They give him new clothes, a mark on his forehead, and this is crucial, they give him a roll with a seal on it.
The roll. This comes up so much in the story. Is this like a passport?
Think of the roll as assurance. Yes, it's his ticket into the celestial city, but psychologically, it's the internal evidence that he belongs to the king. It's his peace of mind. When he has that roll in his hand, he knows he's safe.
But, and here is where the book gets really interesting for me. Just because the burden is gone, it doesn't mean the trip becomes a cakewalk. In fact, now that he's quote-unquote saved, things try to kill him even more aggressively.
That is the reality of the journey. Almost immediately, he hits the hill of difficulty.
He climbs up this steep hill, gets super tired, sits down in an arbor that's just meant for resting, and falls fast asleep. When he wakes up, he runs all the way to the top, only to realize he lost his roll.
The tragedy of sleeping in the daytime, as Bunyan puts it. He got comfortable, he let his guard down. And notice the consequence here. He doesn't lose his salvation, but he loses his assurance.
And he has to walk all the way back down the hill to find it. He has to do the hard work twice just because he was careless.
Exactly. He finds it, but by then the sun has set, and he's terrified of the dark.
He does eventually make it to a place called Palace Beautiful. He passes these chained lions, which are just testing his faith, and meets 3 sisters, Prudence, Piety, and Charity. They take him to the armory and gear him up with a sword, a shield, and a helmet.
And thank goodness they do.
Right, because the next section reads like a full-on fantasy action movie. He goes down into the Valley of Humiliation and meets a monster named Apollyon.
This is one of the most vivid, terrifying scenes in the book. Apollyon is this hybrid monster. He has scales like a fish representing pride bear feet, dragon wings, and he breathes fire.
And usually in stories like this, the monster just roars and attacks. But Apollyon talks. He argues. He claims Christian actually belongs to him.
He says, I'm the prince of the city of destruction. You are one of my subjects. And when Christian refuses to go back, Apollyon switches tactics. He starts listing out all of Christian's failures. You almost drowned in the slough. You tried to take a shortcut with worldly wise man. You fell asleep and lost your role.
That is so insidious. He's weaponizing Christian's imposter syndrome.
Absolutely. Apollyon is the accuser. He's not just trying to kill Christian physically. He's trying to crush him with shame. He's saying, you aren't a real pilgrim. Look at all your mistakes.
They end up fighting for half a day. Christian is wounded in the head, his hand, his foot. He's pinned down. Apollyon is literally about to finish him off. But Christian manages to grab his sword, land a critical strike, and Apollyon flies away.
Christian barely survives. But Bunyan, being Bunyan, doesn't give him a break. Immediately, and I mean immediately, he enters the Valley of the Shadow of Death.
If the last fight was an action movie, this one is pure psychological horror. The path is incredibly narrow. It's pitch black. There's a deep ditch on one side and a quagmire on the other.
And there are demons, hobgoblins and dragons everywhere in the dark. But pay attention to how the demons attack him here. The text says they step up softly behind him and whisper grievous blasphemies into his ear.
But the scariest part is that Christian is so confused and terrified, he thinks the thoughts are coming from his own mind.
That is such a precise, brilliant description of intrusive thoughts or severe anxiety. That feeling that your own mind is completely turned against you, screaming things you don't actually believe. Christian thinks he's lost his faith because he's thinking these terrible things, not realizing it's an external spiritual attack.
He makes it through the night. He eventually catches up with a friend from his hometown, Faithful, which is a huge relief. But then they walk right into a town called Vanity. And in this town, there is a fair that runs all year round.
Vanity Fair, set up by Beelzebub himself.
This part felt so modern to me. It's a market selling houses, lands, honors, titles, lusts, and lives. It's consumerism and worldly status dialed up to 11.
And Christian and Faithful stick out like sore thumbs. They dress differently. They speak differently. The language of Canaan. When the merchants aggressively ask them what they want to buy, they look up and give a very simple answer. We buy the truth.
Which does not go over well with the locals.
No, it doesn't. The world hates them because they refuse to play the game. They are beaten, covered in dirt, put in a cage, and finally put on trial for disturbing the peace.
The judge's name is Lord Hategood, and the witnesses are envy, superstition, and pickthink.
A completely rigged trial.
Yeah. And this is where the story took a turn I really didn't expect. I thought Faithful was going to be the trusty sidekick who makes it all the way to the end, but they actually execute him. They burn him at the stake.
It is a huge shock. Bunyan is showing that the journey is not safe.
Yeah.
Sometimes being faithful gets you killed. But the text provides this beautiful image right after a chariot is waiting in the crowd, and it takes Faithful directly to the celestial city. He got a shortcut home.
Christian manages to escape the prison and finds a new partner, Hopeful, but clearly Christian is still prone to making really bad decisions.
True.
They meet this guy named Mr. Byens from the town of Fair Speech.
Right, Byens. His whole philosophy is what he calls religion in silver slippers. He only likes religion when sun is shining, when it's popular, and when it makes him prosperous. He's walking with his friends, Mr. Moneylove and Mr. Saveall.
And they meet a guy named Demas who tries to tempt them to go look at a silver mine called Lucre.
Byens goes to the mine and is never seen again. Christian, to his credit, refuses.
He refuses the mine, sure, but shortly after that, the road gets rough. So Christian and Hopeful decide to jump a fence into Bypath Meadow because the grass looks softer and it seems to run parallel to the road.
A classic shortcut mistake.
They get completely lost. A massive storm hits, and then they get caught by a giant.
Giant despair.
This section is so dark, the giant throws them into a stinking dark dungeon in Doubting Castle. He beats them without mercy for days. And then his wife, Diffidence, gives the giant some advice.
She tells him to advise the pilgrims to commit suicide. She says offer them a knife, halter, or poison. So the giant goes down and tells them, why would you choose life, seeing it is attended with so much bitterness?
And they actually consider it. Christian is so broken, so beaten down, he asks Hopeful, should we just end it?
This is the absolute deepest pit of depression in the book. Dighton Castle isn't just a physical jail. It's that state of mind where you believe there is absolutely no hope left. You've sinned, you intentionally went off the path, and now you believe you deserve to rot in the dark forever.
So how do they get out? Because they definitely don't fight this giant. They're starving and too weak.
They don't fight. Christian have this sudden realization early on Sunday morning. He just shouts out, "What a fool I am to lie in a stinking dungeon when I may as well walk at liberty." He remembers he has a key in his pocket called Promise.
And the key opens the dungeon door.
It opens every single lock in Doubting Castle. This is Bunyan telling the reader, you cannot fight despair with logic. You cannot fight it with your own strength. You fight it with the promise, reminding yourself of the truth of who you are and where you're going, even when your feelings are telling you otherwise.
That is incredibly powerful. So they escape the giant. They're getting really close to the end of the journey now. But they meet a character who I think confuses a lot of modern readers, a young guy named Ignorance.
Ah, yes, the brisk lad from the country of conceit.
Here's my issue with him. Ignorance seems like a totally nice guy. He's cheerful. He tells them, I pay my debts. I don't rob anyone. I tithe. He's not a monster. But Christian and Hopeful act like he's in massive trouble.
This is a crucial theological distinction for Bunyan. Ignorance represents the do-it-yourself salvation. He got on the path via crooked lane, bypassing the wicket gate. When Christian asks us about his certificate, his role ignorant says, I trust my own heart. He believes he's going to heaven simply because he's a quote-unquote good person.
So to Bunyan, just meaning well isn't enough.
Exactly. Ignorance is bypassing the king's requirements and substituting his own. He hasn't been to the cross. He hasn't dealt with the burden. He's using a homemade passport.
We'll see how that works out for him in a minute. The pilgrims keep going. They run into the flatterer, this man in a white robe who turns out to be black underneath, and he leads them right into a net.
Because they didn't look at their map. A shining one has to come release them and actually whips them for being foolish.
Then they cross the enchanted ground, where the air literally makes them spiritually drowsy.
They have to keep each other awake by talking about their conversion experiences.
And finally, they reach the end of the road. But there's no gate waiting for them. There's a river. The river of death.
And there is no bridge. The shining ones tell them, you must go through it. But here is the fascinating mechanic of this river. The depth of the water is not the same for everyone.
They say it's deeper or shallower depending on your faith.
Right. It's not about how good you were in life. It's about how much you trust the king in that moment. And Christian, who has been the hero this entire time, starts sinking.
He's overwhelmed by fear. He starts remembering all of his past sins. He's crying out, I sink in deep waters.
Which is so profoundly human. Even at the very end of his life, the fear comes rushing back. But Hopeful, the sidekick, is floating easily. He's holding Christian's head above the water, shouting, be of good cheer, brother. I feel the bottom, and it is good.
That's such a beautiful image of community. You need someone to hold you up when you're dying. Eventually, Christian remembers the scripture promise about passing through the waters, and he finds his footing.
They cross over. They climb the hill to the city. There are trumpets, bells, choirs of angels. They present their rolls at the gate. They are transfigured with gold raiment, and they are welcomed in. It is a glorious, triumphant ending.
For them.
Right. Because there's one last loose end.
Ignorance.
Ignorance arrives at the river. But he doesn't struggle like Christian did. He finds a ferryman named Vain Hope who just rows him across in a little boat.
So he actually has an easy, painless death. He doesn't struggle with his conscience at all.
Because he has a totally false sense of security. He walks right up to the Golden Gate, knocks, and fully expects to be let in. The king asks for his certificate. Ignorance fumbles around in his coat and finds nothing.
And this is the moment that genuinely gave me chills. You expect the king to maybe just turn him away, say, sorry, you can't come in. But that's not what happens.
No. The king commands the Shining Ones to bind Ignorance hand and foot. They pick him up, carry him to a door in the side of the hill, a shortcut to the pit, and cast him in. And Bunyan ends this epic vision with a single, chilling line. Then I saw that there was a way to hell, even from the very gates of heaven, as well as from the city of destruction.
A way to hell, even from the very gates of heaven. That is just incredibly harsh.
It is terrifying, but it drives home Bunyan's absolute main point. You can be close to the truth, you can hang out with pilgrims, you can look the part, you can even have a very peaceful death. But if you don't have if you haven't actually dealt with your burden at the cross, you are still lost. Proximity is not the same thing as possession.
It's a heavy note to end on, but it makes you rethink the entire journey. It's not just an adventure story, it's a very serious warning.
Absolutely. It asks the reader, straight up, do you have the Roleto, or are you just taking a ferry?
So as you listen to this, whether you share Bunyan's theology or not, I think those psychological symbols really hold up. We all have a burden. We're carrying guilt, anxiety, past mistakes. And we all have a slough of despond waiting for us the second we try to change our lives.
The real question is, do you have the key of promise when you inevitably get stuck in the castle?
Definitely something to think out. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us. We'll see you on the next journey.